Good evening. This is Rabbi Tzvi Mendel of Congregation Kabbalah Yisrael, Community of Jewish Friends, and we will give over a story tonight, the partial biography of one of the most interesting personalities in Chassidishe Stories of the students of the Holy Baal Shem Tov. The holy Rebbe Menachem Mendel Miriminov, who was known, knew the whole Torah backwards and forwards, the revealed and the hidden, open prophet with Ruach HaKodesh, was already getting older, and he had his shamus, his helper, who was very close to him all the years. But he was getting older also, and the Rimanover was very, very sick and had to be taken care of in a certain way. And so the student of Rebbe Menachem Mendel Rimanov, the Reb Heschel Mesharis, as he was called the rest of his life, was a Gaon Olam in learning, also knowing the whole Torah backwards and forwards, the revealed and the hidden, and the big Chassidishe Stories took over after this shamus was older and had to leave his post. But we'll talk a little bit about Reb Heschel Mesharis, how he became the Gabbai, the Mesharis, the helper of Reb Menachem Mendel Rimanov. The story goes as follows. Reb Heschel Rimanov was born to very poor parents, and became an orphan from both parents. It shouldn't happen to any human being in one day, because there was a horrible plague going on in that part of Europe, and they both passed away in the same day. And so he was brought up by a very simple but pious tailor in his city. The tailor couldn't afford a melamed to teach him, so he taught him what he knew in his line, being a tailor. And after some time, Reb Heschel, being a small child, Tzvi Hirsch, said he's bored of all this and he wants to go and grow in his Yiddishkeit and his study of Torah. He knew he was a Kohen, and he said goodbye to the wonderful people that raised him all the years. And he took a ride. He decided to go to Fristig, where the Rimanover was at that time of his life. For days he traveled, and freezing cold. Sometimes someone picked him up, sometimes not. And finally, after a number of weeks of traveling, he came to the city of Fristig. In the city of Fristig, he slowly but slowly took over the position of being the shamus of Mendel Rimanova. And everybody knew that Heschel doesn't know anything, but he's a very pious person. He said Tillim a lot of times, with much kavanah, with much concentration. He was very humble and kind in his ways. And he was getting older. And the whole city didn't know what's going to be with him, because who's going to read him a shidduch? Who's going to even introduce a match to him? He was the simpleton who was a very pious boy and very honest and sweet, but no one wanted to give their daughter to him. So the holy Rebbe Menachem Mendel Rimanov went to the higher heavens, and one day asked in heaven, who is the right shidduch for my shamus, my loyal shamus Heschel Mesharis? And they revealed to him who the girl was. Next day, in front of everybody, Rabbi Heschel Mesharis was together with the rabbi, excuse me, and all of a sudden, for no reason seemingly, Reb Rubinova says to Heschel Masharis, Heschel, get out of my house, get out of my shul. You're a ganef. You steal. I know that you're a rabbi. And everybody's looking because they knew that he was such a simple, honest, sweet young boy, but no one questioned what the Rebbe says. He ran out of the Beis Medrash, didn't even know where to go, and gets a ride here and there. Finally, it was so freezing cold and such a blizzard. He got a ride with a person, and the person dropped him off at an inn and said, this is where I am for the night, and, do whatever you can. In the inn, there was a woman and her daughter taking care of the inn. Her husband was a businessman, used to go into the city for weeks at a time, and they cared for the inn and took care of it. Heschel goes inside and says, ma'am, can I have something hot to eat and to drink? I'm ready to die because I've been in this frost for days and there's a blizzard outside and someone just dropped me off here. Can I please eat something? And she said, of course. She brought him out a hot meal and something to drink. And then she said, you know what? You'll sleep over here on this bench in the room. In other words, the welcoming room, the corridor. I can't give you a bed in the hotel. We don't have any rooms that are fitting for you. Really, she had rooms, but it was like, the money that she could make on a room, she didn't want to give away to this schlepper. And she says, my daughter and I are going to retire for the night. So you lie down there and go to sleep. And if you hear anyone knocking on the door, call me first, because you got all kinds of people hanging out there, and especially a night like this one. And unless I know the person is a decent person, or merchants that drive by, I don't want to open the door just for anybody. And lies down a couple of hours, he's sleeping, and he hears this rapping at the door, knock, knock, knock. And he says, who's there? And they say, we are a number of rich merchants. We got lost because of the weather, because of the blizzard. And please let us in. He runs to the woman that runs the place, and she comes out, and they looked respectable, and she allowed them in, made a 7-course meal for them, the best of everything. And after the meal, they needed drinks, of course, and they were very, happy to be there, and also very high from the liquor. So they said to the woman, look, it's time for having some fun. It was late at night already, and we've been traveling so long. So this young man over here, so he's a schlepper, and he didn't look like much. How about if we make a mock wedding and marry him off to your daughter over here, this young girl? And they made this fun chuppah and took a couple of tablecloths and tied them together, and they had 2 witnesses, and one of them did the procedure and gave him a ring, and he gave her the ring, and that was the fun for the night. A couple of hours later, they get some sleep, and they're on the way, pay their bill, and they're on the way further. Weather became a little better. Well, late morning, early afternoon, the husband comes from a week of work, knocked out. And when he comes in, Heschel goes over to him and says, Mazel tov, my father-in-law. He says, what? Mazel tov, you're my father-in-law. I married your daughter last night. He said, what? You're a schlepper. You married my daughter? And he calls over his wife and his daughter, and he says, what is this schlepper here, this nothing, talking about? And the wife said, there was a bunch of jesters, merchants that happened to be passing by, and they had this mock wedding, and he takes it seriously. And he says, yes, I do take it seriously. And here's the ring that I gave your daughter. And Mazel tov. The man was just, after a week's work, he didn't have the patience. He says, listen to me, young man. What's your name? Tzvi Hirsch. Listen to me, Tzvi Hirsch. You are not my son-in-law. You are immediately going to give her a get, or else I beat your brains in. And he says, no, what are you talking about? No. And all the time, Rabbi Eshel Misharis knew in the back of his mind unconsciously that since the Rebbe threw him out, calling him a ganef, there was something higher in this whole business, because the Rebbe doesn't act like that. And probably he was trying to drive away the other side and bring in good hashpahs for him, bring in blessings and helping him with his right zivig. So he believed that she was really his right zivig, and that the Rebbe planned this all in heaven, and this is how it happened. So he says, I'm not giving your daughter again. So he called together some of his henchmen over there. They beat his brains in. He says, nothing doing. So he finally decided, the owner of the business says to him, look, Eshel, I'm in business. I'm going to put you upstairs in an attic and lock you up. And until you say that you're going to give a get, I'm not letting you leave. I'm not going to let you allow my daughter to be an iguna, to stay alone without a divorce. And he puts him in a room there every day. They fed him barely minimum something to eat. Finally, a couple of days later, this man calls out Reb Heschel Misharis and he says, Heschel, what can I do that you'll consent to give my wife a divorce, my daughter a divorce? You want money? I'm a very rich person. You want a place to live? What's the story behind the story? And Heschel, in his simplicity and his sweetness, says, listen, I really believe that she's my wife. My Rebbe, Reb Mendele Rimanova, is the only one that can convince me to give a get. Or not. So if you would like to come, I invite you and my wife, your daughter, and your wife to travel into Rimanov. The man said, fine. And all four get on the wagon. Of course, he had two guards sitting on each side of him so that he shouldn't jump off or disappear. Meanwhile, what's going on in Rimanov? The Heilige Mendele Rimanov saw all this with his Ruach HaKodesh, with his open prophecy, his high spirit. And Mendele Rimanov, after davening that morning, after the morning services, he calls out to all the people of the city. Everybody doesn't go to work today. Go back home, put on your Shabbos clothes, everybody with your Shtreimel and Bekesha, and the women with their Shabbos dress. And we're going to meet a chassan and kala, and it's a special day today. As they come into the city, they hear singing, and before they come into the city, they see the Heilige Mendele Rimanova with his chassidim and all the people of the city coming to welcome Heschel. And they couldn't believe it. This proprietor of the business was like beside himself. What is really going on here? I can't believe what I see. And of course, Rabbi Eshel Rimanova tells all the people to come back in 5 hours. We're going to have a Simchas Chassan V'Kala, what they call today. We'll have the dancing after the meal and the mitzvah tans. Meanwhile, the Rimanova Rebbe goes inside the room with his Heschel Misharis and his wife and in-laws. And the father-in-law starts bawling, crying, Rebbe, what is this here? Could you explain what this is all about? My daughter should marry an ignoramus. The schlepper who happened to come into my motel, Please explain it to me. So the Heilige Rebbe Neva says, my good brother, you don't know how lucky you are, and I'll explain it to you. Heschel is not only my Misharis, my helper, but he is in fact my student. He is a hidden tzaddik who knows the whole Torah, the revealed and the hidden Torahs of Kabbalah and of the Baal Shem Tov and the Arizal. Till now, he's been hiding, so everybody thought he doesn't know anything. But I will tell you something. Just as the Arizal came to this world, as he writes in his writings, to put out one student, Reb Chaim Vital, though he had many more students, so too, out of all my students, I came to this world to bring Heschel Misharis to this world. And one day, he'll be a big Rebbe with thousands and thousands of Chassidim. You'll be very proud of who he is. And he'll have children and grandchildren, great tzaddikim. So you have nothing to worry about. The hours go on, people come to dance, and before anything, Reb Menachem Mendel Rebbe announces to everybody, Heschel is a Ganef. As I said, I don't say lies, because every level in holiness and in Kedusha V'Tara and all my levels of growing so high, Heschel has them. He stole them from me. And from then and further, everybody knew who Heschel Misharis was. And this is one of the most beautiful stories of Chassidus.